don't know. Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, good morning, depending where you are in the world. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Ratanataya. Welcome to our second out of 3 programs in honor of Arahat Sanghamitta Theri and her 1,000 following women who ordained and became arahants with her. We're going to begin today with a little bit of meditation, just for a few minutes while people are still arriving. We can settle and come into this space, just sitting quietly together. And in a few minutes, we'll go into the Sutta study. So welcome all coming into our meditation time together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. So, welcome once again, everyone, to our afternoon Sunday Sutta study program. We have a special day today. We will have our Sutta study as usual, but with a special dedication today to remembering the Arahant Sanghamitta Theri and 1,000 women who ordained with her and became Arahants on this day, according to the lunar calendar. How many? Over 2,000 years ago in Sri Lanka. I'll mention her story a little more in a minute. I want to welcome Aya Brahmavara here, joining us again for this afternoon's program, appreciating her leading the meditation this morning and joining us again now. Also, Aya Sopana, we hadn't actually been expecting her to be here. We thought that she had a different program to go out to this afternoon. That program has been canceled, but that's, I guess, to our benefit that we're able to have her here with us after all. In a way, a surprise guest. I'm only sorry that I because I didn't know she would be here, I didn't get our tech set up in the way that's most conducive to having the two of us. So please. Yeah, we'll just coordinate. Please bear with us. It won't be quite as smooth as it would have been if I'd done the setup a little bit differently. But happy to have her with us and to enrich our Sutta study this afternoon. I'd also like to acknowledge our founding abbess, Ayat Taloka, who is not online with us, but was in many ways encouraging and supporting this program from behind the scenes. So appreciating her influence here. So I'd like to start with chanting just one brief verse for us. This is from the Dhammapada, verse 108. Yang kinchiyitang wahutang waloke sangwacharang yajeta punyapekho sabampitang na chatubhagameti abhivadana ujjukate suseyo. Whatever sacrifice or offering in the world a seeker of merit may make for a year, none of it is worth a quarter of bowing to the sincere. So this is to frame our practice for today. We are here today to honor Arahant Sanghamitta Theri. And so some of you may have been following along with us this month, the story of Sanghamitta Theri, who famously brought the Bodhi tree from India to Sri Lanka as a sort of Dhamma missionary, Dhamma messenger. And we celebrated her arrival in Sri Lanka on the full moon 2 weeks ago. But we wanted to have this day also to celebrate another great Arahant Bhikkhuni, whose story often is not included in this, even though it is an integral part of Sanghamitta Theri's story. So quite often, people may learn, if they learn about Sanghamitta at all. In Thailand, for instance, they learned that she was the last Bhikkhuni. But that's not the case. In fact, she was traveling for a purpose, not just to bring the Bo tree, but to bring the Bhikkhuni Sangha to Sri Lanka, to this new land outside of the original Buddhist homeland of India. And she was coming at the request of Queen Anula. She was the vice queen, vicereign of Sri Lanka, the wife of the crown prince. And she had heard the Dhamma from Sanghamitta Theri's brother, Mahinda Thero. And she woke up. She attained the second stage of awakening and was inspired to wish to go forth as a bhikkhuni. But Mahinda Thera was not able to give her that ordination, being a bhikkhu. So it was at her request that they sent to India, asked the Emperor Ashoka to send his daughter, Arahat Sanghamitta Theri, to Sri Lanka to be able to bring the Bhikkhuni Sangha with her and offer this ordination for Queen Anula. And so the Emperor Ashoka was not initially wanting to do this. He would miss his daughter too much, having already sent his son and grandson ahead. So he was resistant, but Sanghamitta Theri said she must go to these women who were awaiting the ordination. So this connection between these two women is a very central part of the story that sometimes gets missed. And we want to bring it forward. Especially this year, we decided to do a special program on this because of a greater deal of extra interest and developments regarding Anula Tissa Theri. She has a memorial stupa in Sri Lanka that until very recently was just a ruin covered over with grass, but has in the past couple years been excavated. They've found the relics inside. They've been, building a museum and having programs there, and sort of just in Sri Lanka, this is becoming more well known that there is this Arahant Bhikkhuni that learned from Sanghamitta Theri. Sanghamitta Theri was not the last. Even Anula Theri was not the last. She ordained along with 1,000 other women, and it's said that all of them became Arahants on this day, this lunar anniversary, along also with the Prime Minister Arita and 1,000 men of Sri Lanka also ordained and became Arahants. So this is a day with 2,000 Arahants waking up all together, and what a strong establishment of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, really putting down the roots of the Buddha's teachings there, and then this becoming a center of Buddhist practice, and being a place where others went out from, spread around the world. A center of Buddhism spread to China, for instance. Several centuries later, there was a Bhikkhuni mission to China, starting from Sri Lanka. And so we celebrate this, and not just the establishment of the monastic Sangha, but the establishment of awakening, seeing awakening itself spreading around the world. So today we honor that. And the way that we honor it is through our practice. This is a day for Patipati Puja. We have a dedication. Patipati means practice, and puja means honor. And there's many ways to honor and respect the Buddha, the Arahants, our teachers. There are many stories about in past lives, the great Theri and Thera Arahant bhikkhus and bhikkhunis of ancient times. They have stories about their past lives where they had met another Buddha and they had given a flower, or they'd given some water, or something like this. And then on the merit of that, having met that Buddha and being able to just give something so small, then that with the dedication, they gave that not just to give, but with the dedication, may I too realize this one day. May I give this flower with the dedication, may I too awaken. And it may take eons, but still that merit was there, and then comes into their final life where they do wake up at the time of our Buddha, Gautama Buddha. So even just giving a flower can have such power in the stories. But the Buddha also gives us explicit direction in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta when he was passing away. Said, how can you best honor the Buddha? How can you best honor your teacher? And it is not through giving a flower, though flowers are wonderful, but the best way is through practice, is to practice in the way that your teacher has taught. That's how you respect and revere and venerate, is to take the teachings on and realize them, realize the truth of them for yourself. That's the most respectful, wonderful thing that one can do. So today, in honor of our first teacher, the Buddha, and the Bhikkhu and Bhikkhuni Arahant Sanghas that he taught, and then the Bhikkhunis following that through Sanghamitta Theri and Anulatisa Theri and the 1,000 Women and the mission to China, and all the way down to our present day. Each step, each person that we learn about in this lineage can be an extra step closer to us, that we can feel closer that this may be possible for us as well. That arahantship is not out of reach, not for people who are not like us, not only for people many thousands of years ago. So by learning about them, by practicing what they taught, by being inspired by their lineage, we make this power, and the invitation is to dedicate it. Dedication to those great Arahantas of the past. And we also invite dedication to the re-arising of Bhikkhuni Arahantas in the present and future, as we water and nurture our own seeds of Bodhi, that they bear fruit. We have seen renowned bhikkhus in the 20th and 21st century Theravada Buddhism, who are widely believed to be Arahantas, and we dedicate that we may see at least a few such bhikkhunis emerging as well. And we invite everyone to join us in making their own resolve to awakening, to doing the work of this path, however long or short that may be, to its happy conclusion. So that's the framing for our practice today, our practice of listening to and discussing the Dhamma, which is very much something recommended by the Buddha. And I invite Ayya Brahmavara to lead us in our sutta study today, and also our very happy coincidence of having Ayya Sobhana here after all, then also hoping to benefit from her words about this sutta as needed. So handing it over to you, Ayya Brahmavara and Ayya Sobhana.
Thank you so much, Venerable Krishna, for this really beautiful and so uplifting introduction, for the beautiful verse and for the dedication, which we can keep in our hearts, friends, as we investigate the Buddha's teachings together. Let's apply all that we have, our hearts and minds today, honouring these wonderful Arahant Bhikkhunis from the past, taking great heart, taking great inspiration from them. Thank you, Venerable. Yeah, so today we're going to look at a Sutta Majjhima number 80, Vekkanasa Sutta. And I'm so delighted to be able to, I hope, invite Ayya Sobhana to please come in whenever and to enlighten us on this sutta. I'd like to give a little bit of intro before I bring the sutta onto the screen for us. It's a sutta where the wanderer, Vekkanasa, comes to see the Buddha, really to discuss his understanding of the spiritual path, Vekkanasa's understanding, that is. And this sutta connects with a couple of other suttas in Majjhima, 77 and 79. They're the Sakuludayan suttas, a long one and a shorter one. And that's homework for us, by the way. 77 and 79. Sakuludayan was a disciple of this Vekkanasa, who we're going to hear from today. And Sakuludayan is very respectful of the Buddha. Whenever the Buddha would go to visit Sakuludayan, this was in Rajgir, in Peacock's sanctuary, where the wanderers would congregate. Whenever the Buddha would go there to see Sakuludayan, there's always a din. There's always lots of talking, lots of noise, lots of spiritual discussion going on. And the Buddha would come and say, "What are you talking about?" And Sakuludayan would very respectfully say, "Nothing important. We please everyone be quiet. The Buddha has come. Let's listen to his teachings." And these two suttas are really wonderful and touch on the kind of practices of Sakuludayan and his disciples and his teacher, Vekkanasa. And also, Sakuludayan is very open to the Buddha's teachings. and he actually wants to become a bhikkhu under the teachings of the Buddha, and his disciples persuade him not to because they like having him as their teacher, and they haven't necessarily taken on the teachings in the same way. So he's actually persuaded not to become a bhikkhu or follow the Buddha's teachings sort of closely, but to continue in the same vein. And we'll find out more about their practices and teachings of this group of wanderers. But interestingly, according to the commentaries, Sakuludayan, who I'm speaking about as the disciple of Vekanasa, he actually is said to have become an Arahant at the very time that we've been speaking of today, the time of Queen Anula, the time of Sanghamitta. He was around at the time of King Ashoka in a subsequent rebirth and became an Arahant. So anyway, that's a little preamble introducing this connection between Majjhima 80 and 79 and 77, which are really worth looking at, friends. So let's launch into the sutta for today, which is Majjhima Nikaya number 80. Also, if we have time, I'm going to bring in another sutta. We'll see how we go. So Ayasobana, I think I'll just launch into the sutta and pause in places and invite you, please, to offer some reflections if you feel moved to do so. So let's begin. Vivekanasa Sutta. Thus have I heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi at Jeta's Grove and Anathapindika's monastery. Then the wanderer Vivekanasa went up to the Buddha and exchanged greetings with him. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he stood to one side and expressed this heartfelt sentiment. This is the ultimate splendor. This is the ultimate splendor. And the Buddha responded, but Kachana, why do you say this is the ultimate splendor? This is the ultimate splendor. What is that ultimate splendor? To which Vivekanasa replies, Master Gautama, the ultimate splendor is the splendor compared to which no other splendor is finer. And the Buddha responds, but what is that ultimate splendor compared to which no other splendor is finer? And Kachana responds, Master Gautama, the ultimate splendor is the splendor compared to which no other splendor is finer. And so the Buddha responds, Kachana, you could draw this out for a long time. You say the ultimate splendor is the splendor compared to which no other splendor is finer, but you don't describe that splendor. Suppose someone was to say, whoever the finest lady in the land is, it is her I want, her I desire. They'd say to him, Master, that finest lady in the land who you desire, do you know whether she's an aristocrat, a Brahmin, a peasant, or a menial? Asked this, he would say, no. And they'd say to him, Master, that finest lady in the land who you desire, do you know her name or clan, whether she's tall or short or medium, whether her skin is black or brown or tawny, what village or town or city she comes from? Asked this, he would say, no. They'd say to him, Master, do you desire someone who you've never known or seen? And asked this, he would say, yes. What do you think, Kachana? This being so, doesn't that man's statement turn out to have no demonstrable basis? Clearly that is the case, Master Gautama. In the same way, you say the ultimate splendor is the splendor compared to which no other splendor is finer, but you don't describe that splendor. I think we'll stop here. So I hope you get the gist of this interesting interaction where Kachana is expressing his spiritual, perhaps, attainment or insight, but isn't really able to quantify it or to invest, to sort of find a way of understanding it. Ayasobana, anything you'd like to come in with at this point?
Okay, here we are. Only that for one who is a beginner in the Dhamma, or for one who has not yet experienced the eye-opening experience of stream entry or stream entry path, that actually the goal of this path, Nibbana, can seem like the most beautiful lady in the land. We don't really know whether she's a peasant or an aristocrat. It's for this reason that the Dhamma that was taught by the Buddha is said to be beautiful at the beginning, beautiful in the middle, and beautiful in the end, so that we can experience immediately the beneficial, wholesome, and healing qualities of this Dhamma, and come to develop enough trust and confidence in the teacher and in the Dhamma to be able to continue along until the eye opens, and we have a chance to see that lady, or see that Nibbana.
Well, I'll do. Thank you so much, Aya. So, friends, we will return to the sutta and see where this conversation goes. So, here, Vekanasa tries to explain a little further. He goes on to say, Master Gotama, suppose there was a beryl gem that was naturally beautiful, 8-faceted, well worked. When placed on a cream rug, it would shine and glow and radiate. Such is the splendor of the self that is free of disease after death. So we're getting a little bit more idea, maybe, about Kachana's experience. And I suppose I'm cheating a bit, because in the commentary, it explains to us that what he's really describing is an experience of jhana. I'd like to ask Ayasobana about this in a moment, but that he's experiencing rupa jhana, where there's still some sense of physicality, and there is great bliss, great contentment, great happiness. And so the assumption is that he is describing the third jhana, and this is what he teaches, this is what his disciples strive for, or it's one aspect of their practice, it is their meditation practice, and its direction. So comparing his experience to a beryl gem. Also, there's a connection with the Vedas here, because Vekanasa is actually a wanderer, but a sort of lay person. They're lay practitioners who've given up their household life to the extent that they're studying the Vedas. and taking inspiration from them. And so this description comes from these ancient verses. Any comment on this simile,
No,
Ayasoban?
please go ahead.
Okay, we can go back to the Sutta, friends, and see how the Buddha responds to this sharing of experience. So he launches into a Dharma teaching. He says, what do you think, Kachana? Which of these two has finer splendor? Such a beryl gem as you describe, or a firefly in the dark of night? A firefly in the dark of night. What do you think? Which of these two has a finer splendor? A firefly in the dark of night, or an oil lamp in the dark of night? Oh, an oil lamp in the dark, sir. What do you think, Kachana? Which of these two has a finer splendor? An oil lamp in the dark of night, or a great mass of fire in the dark of night? A great mass of fire in the dark of night. What do you think? Which of these two has a finer splendor? A great mass of fire in the dark of night, or the morning star in the clear and cloudless heavens at the crack of dawn? Or the morning star in the clear and cloudless heavens at the crack of dawn? What do you think? Which of these two has a finer splendor? The morning star in the clear and cloudless heavens at the crack of dawn, or the full moon at midnight in the clear and cloudless heavens on the 15th day, Sabbath, Uposita day? The full moon at midnight in the clear and cloudless heavens on the 15th day. And what do you think, Kachana? Which of these two has a finer splendor? The full moon at midnight in the clear and cloudless heavens on the 15th day, or the sun at midday in the clear and cloudless heavens in the last month of the rainy season in autumn? The sun at midday in the clear and cloudless heavens in the last month of the rainy season in autumn. And the Buddha goes on, beyond this, Kachana, I know very many gods on whom the light of the sun and moon make no impression. Nevertheless, I don't say the splendor compared to which no other splendor is finer. But of the splendor inferior to a firefly, you say, this is the ultimate splendor, and you don't describe that splendor. So, friends, here it seems to me that through this series of questions and similes, where we go from the bright to the brighter and the brighter and then the very brightest, the Buddha is really gently pointing to the possibility that Vekanasa's understanding of goal in the spiritual life is less than it could be, and that there is beyond, so much beyond what he's so far understood, and that the Buddha, even having given the brightest, the simile of the brightest, the sun at midday, he's saying actually also there is so much more bright than this in different realms of existence, in the higher realms of existence, the Brahma Lokas, such radiance way beyond. And so he's really, I suppose one could say, setting the scene for hopefully receptivity to what he has to teach, and also to giving a sense of where Vekanasa, Sakuladayan, and all the disciples may be settling for less than the best. So I just want to invite Ayasobana, if you'd like to make any comment.
This kind of device we see in several different suttas, where the Buddha takes some aspect of traditional religious beliefs or people's ideas about the miraculous and the wonderful is another one that comes to mind. So then the Buddha sets up a contrast, and I think you'll see in the next very next sentence where the sutta takes a hard pivot, going from the ethereal heights of the heavens right back down to this very body as being where the action is and where the goal is to be discovered. So it's both a caution about not getting too excited or thrilled by different kinds of exalted experiences that could happen, especially during meditation, and also, as you say, gentle kind of ironic comment that the other religious ideas are not the whole story. And we were so surprised that we find the real story is happening here instead of over there.
Oh dear. Thank you so much, Aya. Okay, friends, directed by Aya Sobhana, back we come to see this extraordinary pivot from the highest of the high in samsara to the practice. The Buddha goes on, Kachana. There are these 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. What 5? Sights known by the eye, which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. Sounds known by the ear, smells known by the nose, tastes known by the tongue, touches known by the body, which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. These are the 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. The pleasure and happiness that arises from these 5 is called sensual pleasure. From the senses comes sensual pleasure. Beyond sensual pleasure is the pleasure that surmounts the sensual, which is said to be the best of these. When he said this, Bhikkhunasa said to the Buddha, "It's incredible, Master Gotama. It's amazing how well this was said by Master Gotama. From the senses comes sensual pleasure. Beyond sensual pleasure is the pleasure that surmounts the sensual, which is said to be the best of these. Master Gotama, from the senses comes sensual pleasure. Beyond sensual pleasure is the pleasure that surmounts the sensual, which is said to be the best of these." So a very enthusiastic reception for the Buddhas, pointing to the, in a way we could say problem, pointing to the reality of sense desire. And something very lovely about Sakura-Dayen, Bhikkhunasa, and all of their followers is they're extremely receptive and open to the teachings of the Buddha in all 3 suttas. And they sort of embrace what he has to say. I want to just point out that these wanderers are practicing the precepts very assiduously. So they're practicing virtue, they're meditating, and they're attaining jhana. They're experiencing a lot of fruits of meditation practice, but there's not the full understanding of path. But they're so sort of, I'm going to say, ripe for these teachings, so ready and so quick to understand, actually. But there's an attachment to the sense realm. And this, the Buddha is really honing in on this as that which needs to be seen, that which needs to be overcome. That's what they need to work with. Ayasobana, would you like to come in with any teachings for us?
I do think that it's noteworthy in many of the most profound sutras about enlightenment, that the section about the senses and the delightful sensual objects is part of the setting up of these practices. So this is very important to recognize in many places that this is a starting point. And I think it's also interesting that the starting point is from pleasure, and not that the starting point is from misery. So the Buddha could have taught, your life is so miserable, it's so horrible, you feel so unhappy all the time, and wouldn't you like to get out, by obtaining the highest? But instead, he starts the teaching from the lower kind of happiness, the sensual happiness, and then pointing out that from there's a higher happiness of awakening. This is a really important practice for those of us who perhaps we've been practicing for a while, and we no longer suffer the way we used to when we were teenagers, or when we were, before times we used to suffer a lot, but now we don't suffer so much. But nevertheless, we should never lose our spiritual urgency until we obtain the goal. We shouldn't be satisfied merely with that, the sensual delight.
Thank you so much, Rai. It's such a good point. And this wonderful person, Vekanasa, and all his followers and disciples, they're experiencing a lot of joy, as I was saying, in their practice, because that's their starting point, because they've done a lot already to purify their hearts and minds, and following the precepts and rejoicing in their meditative attainment, such as they are, has led for them to a very happy existence. And so there is that danger of, just settling for that. And here we find the Buddha pointing to the way out of all suffering for them. It's very beautiful, very touching to take in this sutta. Thank you, Ayasobana. Let's go back to the teaching. Now, the Buddha starts to poke a little bit. He says, in response to Kachana's enthusiasm for this teaching about sense pleasure, he says, Kachana, since you have a different view, creed, and belief, then, unless you dedicate yourself to practice with the guidance of tradition, it's hard to understand the senses, sensual pleasure, and the pleasure that surmounts the sensual. There are mendicants who are perfected, who have entered the defilements, completed the spiritual journey, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, achieved their own goal, utterly ended the fetter of continued existence, and are rightly freed through enlightenment. They can understand the senses, sensual pleasure, and the pleasure that surmounts the sensual. When he said this, Vekanasa became angry and upset. He even attacked and badmouthed the Buddha himself, saying, the ascetic Gautama will be worsted. He said to the Buddha, this is exactly what happens with some ascetics and Brahmins. Not knowing the past or seeing the future, they nevertheless claim, we understand, rebirth is ended, the spiritual journey has been completed, what had to be done has been done, there is nothing further for this place. Their statement turns out to be a joke, mere words, vacuous, and hollow. So I think I'll pause here because we can see that the Buddha has really zoned in on Vekkanasa's weak point, if you like, the place where there's ignorance, and he's poked him. And Vekkanasa has responded. But I do see this, friends, not as unskillfulness in Vekkanasa's part, but rather he's goaded by the great teacher to help him to open to the teachings to follow. And what the Buddha's really saying here is, you understand all about sense pleasure and the senses, but you don't understand anything beyond that. You've not seen anything beyond that. And actually, there are many people who have realized that which is beyond the sense realm. And this is really painful for Vekkanasa to hear. But he's perhaps opening to it, even as he reacts so strongly and criticizes the Buddha's statement. Richard.
Thank you, Aya. I just wanted to point something out, that cessation leading into Nibbana, cessation is, I prefer to translate as cessation of sense perception, is a higher pleasure, and Nibbana is the highest pleasure, which is led to by the experience of the cessation. So so it's not that Nibbana is nothing, it's the highest pleasure. And that's what the Buddha is talking about here, that you don't understand pleasure beyond the senses, because the senses, the three lowest senses, smell, touch, and taste, are gone beyond when you enter into the formless realm. But you still have a type of sight and a type of hearing. It's not like physical sight and hearing like we have, but it's more like a mind to mind, type situation. And there's descriptions of Buddha visiting the formless realm and meeting beings who were there who were disciples of former Buddhas, but they haven't attained complete Nibbana. And he interacts with them and speaks with them. And mana, of course, is there. And mana is the movement of the brain, wrongly identifying with something as self, which is not self, or in ownership, this is mine, etc. So this is, those are the six senses. Three are dropped off. You go into the formless realm, and then those three are dropped off when you experience cessation. And you'll discover that that's a higher pleasure than the pleasure of anything you can experience in a realm which is dependent on your sensual experience in those realms. Anyways, that's my opinion. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Richard. Beautiful. Aya Sobana, would you like to add anything?
Only to point out that the definition of right view, the preliminary right view, includes the understanding that there are mendicants who are perfected, who are rightly freed through enlightenment. And so if you look very honestly at yourself and consider whether you believe it's really true that there are mendicants who have entered the defilements, completed the journey, laid down the burden, and so forth, then if that is something that you really know, then you should be happy and glad, because you have one of the important elements of right view, which is the starting point, a great starting point for this whole path of practice. And if you feel still cynical or doubtful about that, then you need to have patience and compassion, and to keep trying to be good, and keep practicing, and see if maybe you'll be lucky enough in this lifetime to have that knowledge to open up for you.
Thank you so much. Friends, we'll return to the sutta now and see what happens next. So Kachana, Vekanasa, has just really erupted at the Buddha. These statements about being an Arahant or the possibility of Arahantship are just a joke, mere words, vacuous and hollow. The Buddha responds to him in this way. He says, Kachana, there are some ascetics and Brahmins who, not knowing the past or seeing the future, nevertheless claim, we understand. Rebirth is ended, the spiritual journey has been completed. What had to be done has been done. There is nothing further for this place. There is a legitimate refutation of them. Nevertheless, Kachana, leave aside the past and the future. Let a sensible person come, neither devious nor deceitful, a person of integrity. I teach and instruct them. Practicing as instructed, they will know and see for themselves. So this is how to be rightly released from the bond, that is, the bond of ignorance. So just to pause here, the Buddha's really, to my understanding, saying, yes, you know, you are. I do appreciate your viewpoint that there are those who claim to be free from all suffering, to have completed the spiritual journey to its end point, and they may not always be thus. It may not always be the case. And yet, you know, if a person has integrity, if a person opens to my teachings, then this possibility is there. And so I really feel the Buddha, the way he's leading Kachana on into an appreciation, an openness, a receptivity to the Dharma. HERstory, can I invite you to share a few words?
Please continue.
Okay, we'll return to the sutta. And I just want to say before we do, if anyone else, or we have, just to say before we read on, if anyone else would like to come in with questions, comments, reflections, you are so welcome. Just to put up a hand and we'll come to you. So to continue, the Buddha then gives a simile. He says to Kachana, Vekanasa, he says, suppose there was a little baby bound with swaddling up to the neck. As they grow up and their senses mature, they're accordingly released from these bonds. They'd know, I'm released, and there would be no more bonds. In the same way, let a sensible person come, neither devious nor deceitful, a person of integrity. I teach and instruct them, practicing as instructed, they will soon know and see for themselves. So this is how to be rightly released from the bond. That is the bond of ignorance. When he said this, Bhikkhunasa said to the Buddha, excellent Master Gotama. From this day forth, he sings the praises of the Buddha. He's completely open to these teachings, and he requests, from this day forth, may Master Gotama remember me as a lay follower who has gone for refuge for life. Ewan. So, HERstory, would you like to share any comments before we move on to perhaps another sutta?
Well, this sutta covers a lot, doesn't it, in just a couple of sentences? The entire practice of the Dhamma according to the teachings. We know that originally, those sincere practitioners who had been, purified their morality and who had looked deeply into things, were practicing meditation, then when they happened to encounter the Buddha, just hearing a few words of the true Dhamma could be enough for their awakening. Being in the presence of the Buddha, or being even in the presence of one of the Arahant teachers, and hearing the teaching when they were, primed and ready because of their previous practices, could be just like a finger snap. They could wake up, or perhaps hearing about these instructions about the Eightfold Noble Path and the other elements of the teaching, they could follow those practices, and in no short time they can wake up. Then, as time went by through the subsequent later on history, it seems like the scholars and the commentators got a hold of it, and what had to be accomplished in order to reach that awakening got to be more and more complicated. That one would have to completely master what's called the Wings to Awakening, or 7 sets of different teachings. One would have to, according to some of the suttas, the best enlightenment is through both having the 4 jhanas and the formless attainments, and then it seemed like, in a way, in the hand of the scholars, that the goal of the practice becomes more and more distant and actually unattainable. But if we read the early suttas, it's so simple and so attainable. Just follow the instructions, and it's reachable. It's attainable, just as naturally as a baby outgrows their swaddling clothes. I just learned a few days ago what it is to swaddle a baby. I saw a demonstration of a baby being wrapped up in swaddling. It was they're not like wrapped up tight. They're able to move around a little bit inside of their swaddling, and they just have this, kind of comfortable enclosure to be in. But in order, to be free, we need to go beyond that. And the baby grows up because of having parents, and we have a chance to grow up because we have a teacher. That's my idea.
Sadhu, sadhu. That's so beautiful. Thank you, Aya. It's so sweet as well, isn't it? The simile of the baby. It's like, it's okay. You can be a baby, and you're going to grow up. And just that insight of sense pleasure being the obstacle and getting it straight away, that is the bondage here. And as soon as he could realize that, he would be able to let go of that sense desire. What a very amazing progress can be made if we see the danger in desire and are willing to let go of desire. Thank you, Aya Sobana. And this leads very nicely onto another sutta that I'd like to bring in for us today. And it's from Samyutta Nikaya, 3595, Malunkya Putta Sutta. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring it up for us on the share. There we are. Malunkya Putta. Malunkya Putta is, despite his name, son of Malunkya, he's actually quite elderly. And he comes to the Buddha in this way. He says to him, "Venerable Sir, it would be good if the Blessed One would teach me the Dharma in brief, so that having heard the Dharma from the Blessed One, I might dwell alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent, and resolute." And the Buddha says, "Hear now, Malunkya Putta, what should I say to the young bhikkhus? When a bhikkhu like you, old, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, come to the last stage, asks me for an exhortation in brief. Malunkyaputta responds, although Venerable Sir, I'm old, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, come to the last stage. Let the Blessed One teach me the Dharma in brief. Let the Fortunate One teach the Dharma in brief. Perhaps I may understand the meaning of the Blessed One's statement. Perhaps I may become an heir to the Blessed One's statement. So just a pause here. Quite an interesting interaction. Malunkyaputta being challenged by the Buddha and persisting in his inquiry. And I'm really touched by the line, I may become an heir to this statement, as if, you know, the words of the Buddha, he will fully, you know, take them in and embody them and align with them. So here is a disciple who's so ready and open and keen and ardent for the teaching. Any comment, Ayasobana, at this point?
This statement, may the Buddha teach the Dhamma in brief. When I've heard it, I live alone, withdrawn, diligent, keen, and resolute. This appears in several different suttas. And if you ever have the opportunity to request teachings from a very highly accomplished Dhamma teacher, this is a very suitable way to ask for teachings. You don't want to bother the teacher with just constantly coming back and asking for more and more questions, and day after day they have to tell you the same thing over and over again. You may just, who knows, you might just have one chance to speak to this teacher. And so then you should listen, and then you should have this definite determination. I will really hear the teaching. And then after I've heard the teaching, I will go apart and on my own, withdrawn, diligent, keen, and resolute, I will teach with these lessons and make the effort to put it into application. So I know the Buddha teased him for being old, but nevertheless, this question was properly phrased, and he's proper and respectful in repeating his request.
Thank you so much, Aya. Okay, friends, back to the sutta. He has certainly, as Ayasobana said so rightly, he has asked so properly. He's open to the Buddha's teachings. He's suitably prepared. The Buddha responds, what do you think, Malunkyaputta? Do you have any desire, lust, or affection for those forms cognizable by the eye that you have not seen and never saw before, that you do not see and would not think might be seen? No, Venerable Sir. Do you have any desire, lust, or affection for sounds cognizable by the ear, smells by the nose, tastes by the tongue, tactile objects cognizable by the body, or for those mental phenomena cognizable by the mind that you have not cognized and never cognized before, that you do not cognize and would not think might be cognized? No, Venerable Sir, says Malunkyaputta. So this is quite interesting. My understanding of this, friends, is the Buddha's inviting Malunkyaputta to tell him whether he has any kind of unfinished business, in the sense of unfinished desires that are niggling away at him, desires that are tormenting him, that are likely to catch him and result in him doing, being, seeing, hearing, etc., more, is he still attached or lusting or craving after sense experiences? And his answer is an unequivocal no to each question relating to each sense door or each type of sense experience. Ayasobana.
We think that this greed is the natural state of a human being, but actually we had to learn how to be greedy. We had to learn sensual craving. That's why in a society that capitalism needs to spend millions of dollars trying to help us to remember to be greedy. They say that somebody who's in some kind of society where they don't have access to certain kinds of goods, but then they may even through they may see the example of somebody who's supposed to be wealthy, supposed to be great, getting possession of something and sort of like flaunting and having something that others don't have, and then so that then they learn to wish for something that they don't have. So this whole pattern of endless greed, endless desire, is something that it's not a necessity to be that way. And Malakya Buddha is saying, in this case, to this extent, no, sir. He's got trained out of that.
Thank you, Aya. Yeah, isn't it the case, Ayasobana, that we may know people who, even in the last, days, weeks, months of their lives, are still, they still have their bucket list. They're still not finished, they're not done. And what we can be very sure of for those people is that, of course, there's not going to be an end to the suffering at the end of life, that there's going to be an impulse, a strong, perhaps, force of consciousness that will continue the round of suffering. And so it really behooves us to, not just when we're old, but when we're young also, if we're fortunate enough to develop wisdom, to let go of becoming anything more. It's only then, isn't it, Ayasobana, that we can start to kind of retrace and root out all the latent desire and aversion and ignorance that's here for us. That takes up all our time and energy. There's really no time to seek out more experiences. It's like, let's just deal with what we have.
There's a certain way that this has to do with effort. While we're trainees in the path, not yet reached the goal, we need to make the effort, continuously make this effort of purification, be aware when greed, desire, different unwholesome states arise, and make the effort to find out how to abandon and relinquish those and not to pick them up again. So it's making effort. But then at the end, there's not any more efforts to make. So the awakening is not something that's happening because of making one last push or making one last, let me get it, or something like that. That's not what it's like at the end. It's more like the process of nature when the work is complete, then the awakening comes.
Oh, dear. Thank you, Aya. So, friends, let's return to the sutta. So, having let the Buddha know that he has no more inclination to get, be, become, enjoy any more unexperienced experiences, the Buddha goes on. Here Malankya-Putta, regarding things seen, heard, sensed, and cognized by you, in the seen, there will merely be the seen. In the heard, there will be merely the heard. In the sensed, there will be merely the sensed. In the cognized, there will be merely the cognized. When Malankya-Putta, regarding things seen, heard, sensed, and cognized by you, in the seen there will be merely the seen, in the heard there will be merely the heard, in the sense there will be merely the sensed, in the cognized there will be merely the cognized. Then, Malankya-Putta, you will not be by that. When, Malankya-Putta, you're not by that, then you will not be herein, therein. When, Malankya-Putta, you're not therein, then you will be neither here, nor beyond, nor in between the two. This itself is the end of suffering. So, friends, this very profound teaching, in short, in brief, that the Buddha gives to Malankya-Putta once he's ascertained that he is very sincerely practicing for Nibbana. You're not beside your experience, you're not in your experience, and you're nowhere else to be found. Isn't that an amazing contemplation for us, just to consider that last teaching by Yasobana?
The way the teaching is given in the Pali language is very concise, and depends on the Pali grammar. I guess I'll recite it. Tato tuam Malankya-Putta natena yato tuam Malankya-Putta natena tato tuam Malankya-Putta natata yato tuam Malankya-Putta natata. So I'm going to, with my poor grammar, I'll say that for you is not not because of that. For you, it's not because of that. And then the other one is from you, it's not because of that. So it's like whether you're the subject or the object of that equation. And so the other one is saying something like, for you, that's not it. And controlled by you, that's not it. So something like that. It's quite challenging to translate. The translation, Sujata's translation, you won't be by that. When you're not by that, you won't be in that. When you're not in that, you won't be in this world or in the world beyond, or in between the two. This is the end of suffering.
Thank you. I really appreciate you bringing in the Pali there, and also Bhante Sujato's translation, so we can compare, friends. Out of honor of Ananea, I picked Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. I know there's a certain partiality there to the beautiful translations of Bhikkhu Bodhi, but how wonderful to compare and to hear the Pali. It's really profound. Friends, I recommend, isn't it, Ayasobana, wouldn't it be good if we all just look at the Pali and translate word for word and consider that?
I'm not sure I can do it properly because this Pali is too deep for me.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, Richard might have a way of explaining it.
Richard.
Thank you, Aya. There's a certain sutta where Buddha says that if a man is attracted to a woman, it's because he wants to be a man. And if a woman is attracted to a man, it's because he wants to be a woman. And I think if you think about it a little bit, I think it has the flavor of this. You know, you won't be defined in it or outside of it or around it. Right? You know what I mean? So Buddha is kind of that example, right? You're defining yourself, right? I like say in my case as a man, say, okay, I like women, right? But that defines me as a man. So I think there's that subtle understanding in there, you know, that you have to get beyond the, you know, Buddha says that there's the realm of diversity and the realm of unity, right? And the Brahma realm of form, this is just my opinion based on my study and contemplation, that the Brahma realm of form is not sexual. That's why you can experience what's the word? Sorry, my brain's not working too well. Equanimity, right? Because you're not differentiating between things. So it's not that Brahma gods are male, like I think a lot of people like to think. It actually doesn't have anything to do with that. And there's the heaven just below that, which is usually described as those who are interested in others' creations. But the word actually has a feminine nature to it, like female gods. And I think what they're saying is that when you drop below that, then that differentiation begins to happen. And it's for that reason why from the Brahma world, you start to drop that differentiation. And then if you can separate yourself out, you can go to boundless space. You know, you're no longer even dependent on form, because that differentiation of form starts to drop off. So you can go beyond, you know, thinking of yourself in a form like that. But anyways, that's just my opinion. But thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Richard. That's just a beautiful illustration, and just really picking up on this nowhere to be found. We're not identifying with the object or with the one who's observing the object, and we cannot be found then anywhere in between the two. And this seeing, in the seeing, there's just the seeing, the hearing, just the hearing. Nothing's added, nothing's taken away. It does bring to mind Majjhima number 1, you know, especially you're speaking about the gods, Richard, just to consider the teachings in Majjhima Nikaya number 1. This very important teaching, which is again emphasizing, you know, that if we identify with or we objectify anything at all, then we're lost in it. And the way to let go of suffering is to disidentify, disentangle ourselves, and just be here. It's that simple. Or it can sound very simple, but of course to practice this is to keep letting go of anything that we are tethered to. And first we have to notice that we're attached, and only then we can work with that and be released. Like the baby in the swaddling, you have to recognize that the swaddling is there before you can free yourself. That was Bhikkhuni's journey there with the Buddha in the last sutta. Ayasobana.
This might be a good time. This may be a good time to go to the poem and hear this, the idea again rendered in verse.
Thank you, Aya. Here we go. This is the beautiful culmination of this sutta. Malunkyaputa's verses. In response to the Buddha's teaching, which he gets, he says, I understand in detail, Venerable Sir, the meaning of what was stated by the Blessed One in brief. And he says, having seen a form with mindfulness muddled, attending to the pleasing sign, one experiences it with infatuated mind and remains tightly holding to it. Many feelings flourish within, originating from the visible form. Covetousness and annoyance as well, by which one's mind becomes disturbed. For one who accumulates suffering thus, Nibbana is said to be far away. And so he repeats this beautiful verse in relation to hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking in the same way. And he goes on then to say, having known an object with mindfulness muddled, when firmly mindful, one sees a form. One is not inflamed by lust for forms. One experiences with dispassionate mind and does not remain holding it tightly. One fares mindfully in such a way that even as one sees the form or hears the sound, tastes the taste, etc., and while one undergoes, therefore, a feeling, suffering is exhausted, not built up. For one dismantling suffering thus, Nibbana is said to be close by. And so with the other senses, one fares mindfully in such a way that even as we experience the experience, while we undergo a feeling in relation to that experience, this is an opportunity for suffering to be exhausted, not built up. Mindful awareness, feelings arising and passing. For one dismantling suffering thus, Nibbana is said to be close by. It is in such a way, Venerable Sir, that I understand in detail the meaning of what was stated by the Blessed One in brief. Good, Malankya-Putta. It is good that you understand in detail the meaning of what was stated by me in brief. The Buddha repeated the verses and he really praised the teaching here of Malankya-Putta. Malankya-Putta delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's words and departed. Then dwelling alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent and resolute, the Venerable Malankya-Putta, by realizing it for himself with direct knowledge in this very life, entered and dwelt in that unsurpassed goal of the holy life, for the sake of which people rightly go forth from the household life into homelessness. He directly knew, destroyed his birth, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there's no more for this state of being. And the Venerable Malankya-Putta became one of the Arahants. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So friends, it's beautiful teaching, this process and teaching of the Buddha, again, in this example, just the right teaching to lead the disciple to the realization that's required. How beautiful. These verses are so lovely. Aya Sobana, would you like to say any closing comments for us?
There's one phrase in this poem, you're said to be close to Nibbana. In Pali, Santike, that's close, or in the presence of, in the vicinity of, Santike Nibbana Vuchati. So it's called close to Nibbana, or some translations say it's called in the presence of Nibbana. In many different suttas, in many ways, we see this expression. So all of the practices that we do, everything we do with effort, is bringing us closer and closer to Nibbana until, finally, I think this is a wonderful image of the last moment when we can lay down the plow, we can lay down our tool, lay down our effort, and then breathe out, and then it's finished. So this Santike Nibbana Vujjati, I had a funny conversation with, I had to tell Luke about this because I had always, as I was trained years ago, I always heard it as being close to Nibbana. And it was always like you can get closer and closer and closer and closer, but you can never quite reach there. But then this other translation is about being in the presence of Nibbana. Thinking of it in that way, it's more like you don't have to keep reaching and reaching. You're already there. Just, you're there. The work is finished. That's my thought about that.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Richard.
Thank you, Aya. Yeah, actually, in my book, I crossed out close by and I put present. So I kind of saw the same thing before when I was looking at the Pali. But I want to make a note here, and I hope this is not controversial. But there's quite a number of these type of suttas where someone comes to the Buddha and asks for some kind of teaching. They feel like they're ready to go and make that final push. And you might notice that the Buddha never says, okay, you go and sit down and establish mindfulness and then. No, he always explains a philosophical deep insight that gives your mind the ability to make that transformation, and then they go off and they do practices. You know, they do the endeavor. How did they put it here? Then the Venerable Malankiyaputta, having delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One word, rose from his seat, and after paying homage to the Blessed One, keeping him on his right side, departed. Then, dwelling alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent, and resolute, the Venerable, by realizing it for himself, with direct knowledge in this very life, entered and dwelt in that unsurpassed goal of the holy life, etc. So, I'm not saying don't do meditation, but it's just like the other sutta we were reading, right? You have to overcome ignorance, right? Usually translated as ignorance. Avidya, I prefer incomplete knowledge. So it says when incomplete knowledge is destroyed and vidya, complete knowledge arises, right? Then one attains nibbana. So it's this type of information and these type of suttas. The Buddha is looking at each person individually, and he's keying on, because he knows these disciples, you know, certain things about them, and he's trying to give them just that right type of knowledge to get their mind to make that final, you know, push. And anyways, I think that's important to understand, because it's the same thing. There's many suttas about how to attain sotapan, and Buddha gives the same thing. Okay, you go and you spend time with the teacher, and you inquire from him, and you learn it, and you memorize it, and you speak it to others, and you talk about it until it becomes like second nature, and then more and more and more Dhamma, the Dhamma follower, until you get the mental breakthrough, that insight that opens up your mind and frees you that first level, so that you can understand, you know, that the Buddha is the true teacher, right? That rites and rituals and activities like that and stuff, you know, can't bring one to nibbana. They may have some magical use in the world, who knows? I don't believe in it myself, but you know, a lot of people like to believe those things, right? And you see that, you know, the physical body, right, or any kind of body, any of the three bodies, but in that case, usually on the physical body, is not the self. And that mental breakthrough helps you see, you know, why the Four Noble Truths and everything, and see cessation and see the way, you know, the Eightfold Path, the way to cessation, like that. And of course, it teaches Samuppada, you know, the interconnection between the arising of things, and how with the thing above, if it disappears, then obviously the thing below disappears. The thing above that disappears, this disappears, like that. And it starts with ignorance. in that sense, right? That's or incomplete knowledge, So when incomplete knowledge is completely banished, right? Complete knowledge arises, and the whole system of what's binding you to this realm is gone. Anyways, that's my view. But thank you very much for listening.
Oh, dear Richard, beautifully put. Thank you so much for that. Venerable Kachina, can we invite you to close? Thank you so much, everyone, for being here for this
I want
beautiful.
to say, yes,
ritual.
indeed. I want to say sadhu, 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 anumodama. We appreciate. Thank you so much to Ayya Sobhana and Ayya Brahmavara for leading us through these wonderful suttas together. Yeah, I really appreciate both of them. This sort of, you can see the steps, these two different practitioners, Vekanasa and then Malunkyaputta, sort of at different stages. So Vekanasa, he is a practitioner. He's stepped out from the sensual desire world a little bit, has found something higher than that, is aimed at something something ultimate, but needs a little direction. And then we could sort of imagine with this direction, Vekanasa in a few years, maybe he's somewhere where Malunkyaputta is at the start of the second sutta, maybe ready to get that sort of last final teaching from the Buddha and go all the way to arahantship. And just how encouraging to see these different practitioners and this skillful guidance of the teacher and the Dhamma. And again, hopefully tying back to our theme of arahantship, that it is something that is possible, that we can dedicate ourselves towards no matter where we are along that spectrum of practitioners. We've all come here today for some reason, for some inspiration, to listen to the Dhamma, to speak about the Dhamma, contemplate the Dhamma, practice together, and wishing again to come back to dedicating that, the merits of that wonderful practice together to the great Arahantas of the past, to the present day flourishing of the Bhikkhuni Sangha, the re-arising of Bhikkhuni Arahantas, indeed Arahantas of any sort, any type. We wish for their re-arising, and for ourselves, for our own awakening, our own path, that our inspiration from those of the past may bring us along that path ourselves, that as we honor them with our practice, we also honor ourselves and come into awakening ourselves and are able to share it forward with others. So anumodana to everyone here today for your practice, and we can invite you again to dedicate this towards all of our mutual awakening and to the awakened ones. Irang no punyang asawakayo hotu. Irang no punyang magapalanyanasa hotu. Irang no punyang nibbanasa pachayo hotu. May this be cause and condition for our awakening. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Ayya.
All right. So thank you, everyone. This concludes our program for today. There will be one more program in this theme of ringing in the new year with the Arahants on Tuesday evening for New Year's Eve. Welcome to join us for that. Hope to see some of you there, and have a good afternoon, good evening, good night.
Thank you, Ayya Kachina.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ayas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ayas. Blessings.